So what ended up happening in that scenario?
Well, in that scenario, she ended up doing a lot better. She ended up being compliant with her medication, and she started to invest more time in her children because she seen that that was her children were her priority. Because my conversation with her is that if you continue to not be as involved with your children, there's a possibility that they'll be taken from you. I have been a social worker for about 6 years. So, funny story. I started social work because I knew I wanted to help people. What I love most about it is seeing people succeed. With social work, our goal is to help people have a good mental health. So that means good self-care, good social skills, good communication skills, ability to navigate, and just being able to be comfortable in who they are as a person. So mental health can range from anything. So major depression to bipolar disorder to adjustment disorder to anxiety, just anything you could think of contributes to our mental health. So I see a lot of things. One of the things that I did in my position is that I worked with children in the foster care system. And one of the things is a lot of kids were removed as a result of their parents either suffering from a mental health diagnosis, and as a result of that, the child was neglected. So say for instance, a parent came in and they had missed like 10 days of school with the child. It could be an array of things that may have happened in their lives that we don't know. Some of the parents came in depressed. The reason why they couldn't bring their child to school is because they were severely depressed, and so that impacted their ability to bring the child to school. We had parents who suffered from other mental health disorders that required them to take medication, so they'll become forgetful, or if they do take a medication, they'll oversleep. So I worked with parents, and I also worked with kids who had behavior problems, who dealt with like trauma, just environmental problems, and their own parents, like mental health. It's like every other normal person. I've dealt with depression, I've dealt with anxiety, I've dealt with even paranoia, just about life circumstances in general. Seeking help was the only way that I was able to get through. For me to sit here today and tell you guys that I too went to therapy, I think everyone needs therapy. I don't care in what field you are, how powerful you think you are, you need an outlet outside of your family members, because it's nothing more refreshing than having a neutral party just to hear you out.
Remember to like, subscribe, and most importantly, share. Donate to our Patreon page to help support making more content just like this. Also, follow me on Instagram at Thanks for Sharing TV. Yamile and I have been friends for years. We met working at a local school where she was a social work intern and I was a teacher. I watched her grow as a professional over the years. She has been on the front lines working to strengthen families and communities. She's a dear friend and confidant.
What's up, guys? Welcome to Thanks for Sharing again. I am here with Yamile Florival. Did I say it right?
Yes, that's right.
She is a social worker and a child care advocate here in Washington, D.C., and she's going to be telling us a little bit about how mental health affects families. So welcome, and thank you for sharing, Yamile.
Thank you for having me.
So tell me a little bit about your profession and how you help, sort of distinguish between the two.
Okay.
A parent, first of all, tell me about a parent who, whose child may have mental health issues and they may be in denial about it, and they don't want to get services for them.
Right. So, there's this, I guess, like a treatment plan that kids have in school, and it's called an IEP. It's an individual education plan. And what that does is kind of give supports to children who have mental health or special needs. So it could range from a learning disability to an emotional disability. And what happens is parents don't want that stigma, and that's even with mental health. No one wants to be labeled as crazy or special needs. And so my work with parents is just to let them know that this is a support for you and your children. And I've also gotten the opposite. Well, what can I do to help my child?
You
And
have?
So, yeah, I have gotten that from parents too. Like, my child needs help. Is there anything that the school can do? And I'm like, well, we can go to them and present to them that this child needs an extra little help outside the classroom.
An IEP, or Individualized Educational Plan, is more than just a written legal document. It's a map that lays out the program of special education instruction, supports, and services kids need to progress and thrive in school. Each program is designed to meet students' unique needs. Both the program and the written plan are covered by the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, IDEA. I know, it's a little on the nose.
We don't want our children to be labeled as bad because no child is bad. Let them know the ground rules about life, then they should be fine.
What about a person who's got their own mental health issues? The last person I had on here, Taryn, hey, from Taryn's World. You know, she found out she was bipolar
Okay.
in her 20s, but her mother was diagnosed as being bipolar way before she was even born.
Oh.
Her mother never told her.
Okay.
And she had to find out as a young woman what was going on with her. So I asked that question to say, like, what do you do with parents who may be struggling with their own mental health and they take it out on their kids? And then what are the protocols for someone in your position?
Okay, sure. So parents who struggle with their own mental health and kind of have a problem with understanding mental health, what I kind of tell them is that they need to accept it and acknowledge it. So if you don't acknowledge that you have a mental health problem, then how can we work together to help you and your child? And I don't want to call it a problem because everyone has mental health. Like,
Right.
people who don't have a diagnosis have mental health issues. So just because they have a diagnosis doesn't mean that they are a problem. And I want people to get away from that because
Yeah, we really, I mean, even in making this show, like, I don't know what to call it. It's like our mental well-being.
that's a good way. Because
Emotional
it is.
health.
Yeah.
Because it's a spectrum, right? It's not just about, like, okay, well, if I got mental health issues, like, that's it.
Yeah.
Like, so tell me a little, can you name a specific incident where, like, a parent may have had, like, borderline personality disorder, or they were manic, or they were depressed, anything like that?
Yeah, so I've had, this was earlier in my career. I worked at an outpatient clinic in Washington, D.C., and I had a parent, but she had bipolar disorder, and she also had a personality disorder. So I've seen her in all phases.
Oh, wow, okay.
I've seen her very happy, and I've seen her very sad. I've seen her to the point where she changed her name. Like, that day, her name was a completely different person. She dressed completely different. The next day, she was a completely different person, had a different name, and dressed completely different.
So what was that? What was that disorder that she was experiencing?
She had borderline personality disorder. But her main diagnosis was bipolar disorder, because I've seen her very manic, and I've seen her very depressed. So there's two types of bipolar. There's bipolar 1, where you're extremely manic and you have some symptoms of depression. But then bipolar 2, it's you're hypomanic, which is you're manic for like a week, but then you're depressed for a long period of time. And so the impact that it had on her children is that they didn't know who mom was for that day. They didn't know who mom was for that week. And it's like I had to have a conversation with her about compliance and medication, talking to her psychiatrist, talking to her doctors, talking to her therapist, just about how to manage her overall mental health.
According to MentalHealthAmerica.org, the fact that a parent has a mental illness alone is not sufficient to cause problems for the child and family. Rather, it's how the mental health condition affects the parent's behavior, as well as familial relationships that may cause risk to a child. And most importantly, the extent to which the parent's symptoms interfere with positive parenting, such as their ability to show interest in their children, will determine the level of risk to their child. The child's age and stage of development is also important. Preventative interventions aimed at addressing risk factors and increasing children's protective factors increase the likelihood that they will be resilient and grow and develop in positive ways.
So what ended up happening in that scenario?
Well, in that scenario, she ended up doing a lot better. She ended up being compliant with her medication. And she started to invest more time in her children because she seen that her children were her priority. Because my conversation with her is that if you continue to not be as involved with your children, there's a possibility that they'll be taken from you.
Children can sense emotional changes, and they can often tell if someone is hiding something from them without their knowledge. Some children may be able to fully understand what it means to have a mental health condition. In addition, a child may also be able to help support you by reminding you to take your medicine or help you stay on track. Your decision to talk to your child about your condition should also take into account your readiness. Parents often want to appear invincible and strong to their children, as they think it's the parent's role to care for a sick child and not the other way around. Parents should always talk to their doctor or therapist about the best ways to bring up this information. You may want to consider the possibility of inviting a child to a session to explore this information.
No parent who wants to be a parent, who loves their child, wants their child taken from them.
Right.
Like, no parent.
Right.
Like, it doesn't matter who you are. You can inadvertently be a quote unquote bad parent.
Mm-hmm.
You might not think that you're parenting bad, but because your illness is you're making it that way for you, you don't want it to happen. So it's like climbing out of that.
Right.
It's such a huge thing.
According to findlaw.com, child neglect is a form of abuse in which the caregiver fails to provide for the child in some way that can result in physical, emotional, psychological, or even educational harm. When most people consider mistreatment of children, they think of active abuse, like hurting a child or molestation of a child. But neglect is basically passive abuse. You don't even know you're doing it when it's happening. Neglect is by far the most common form of child mistreatment in the U.S. In fact, 78% of child maltreatment victims suffer from neglect. 18% suffer from physical abuse. 9% suffer from sexual abuse. It can be incredibly dangerous. Over 2,200 children in the United States died of abuse and neglect in 2012. And nearly 70% of those children died because of neglect. Surviving victims of neglect also experience many psychological issues over time, from attention and language deficits to reducing mental function to lower academic success as a result. So it's really important that your child get the help they need to get out of those situations where they've been neglected. And if you notice that a child has been neglected, you do need to take action as a family member or a trusted friend.
So a lot of the families that I have worked with have problems with acknowledging that they have a mental health problem or don't want anybody to know that they have a mental health problem. And some of my work is educating family members on what a mental health is or what a diagnosis is so that they can support that family member, because it takes a village to help people. And so if I can educate family members, then they can help that one person or 2 or 3 people in their family who's struggling with any type of issues.
What would you say would be some of the first steps in sort of trying to heal and help our families through some of their mental health issues?
So some of the things that I would encourage people is to look out in your community and see what's out there. There are plenty of resources outside that are free to people. I will also encourage people to check out NAMI, which is the National Alliance on Mental Illness. It is a great website to go to find a support group, because if you can find a support group of people and families who deal with a member who has a mental illness, then you feel like, okay, I'm not alone. Because what happens is people feel isolated in their mental illness. And it's like, no, someone walking down the street next to you is struggling with their own mental health.
Exactly.
Someone sitting on the bus next to you is struggling with their own depression. You just never know.
Thank you so much for just sharing. And thank you so much for your support and just these resources that you've given. I will be putting the links in the description box below of everything that you can find as far as family and well-being and child services, child advocacy in the description box below. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
To Yamile Florval. If there's anything else you need to know, please do check us out, and thanks for sharing. Bye.
If you've gotten anything from this video, please do me a favor and hit the like button. Subscribe and hit the bell icon to be notified when more content like this arrives. If you have a story to tell, I'd love to hear it. Contact me at tu.yamile the number 4, sharing@gmail.com.